Xiao, the young assistant to CEO James of the Deshang Corporation, attended a business dinner with her boss and is later taken to his home after being drunk. An anonymous tip from a nearby phone booth reports James to the police for sexual assault. At the same time, Xiao receives a message from her colleague Chen, who knows she is with James and asks if she is okay, but Xiao clearly isn't. As Chen considers calling the police, they have already arrived. The police find Xiao hiding in the bathroom, visibly shaken, and take both her and James to the station for questioning. From a distance, the anonymous tipster takes photos of the scene. James and Xiao are questioned separately, and Xiao is taken to the hospital for examination. Vice President Ava and top lawyer Lynn are summoned to handle the crisis for James. James insists everything was consensual, while Xiao eventually denies being forced into anything. Since the testimonies match and the forensic examination shows no signs of violence, both James and Xiao are released to go home. James now wants to find out the identity of the anonymous tipster so he can sue them for defamation, as the accusations have damaged his reputation and negatively affected Zhang's company's stock price. The media quickly published the story, and Xiao's identity was leaked. Neighbors are surrounding her house to gossip when she arrives home. Even her parents have already heard the news. They press her for an answer, and her father even slaps her when she couldn't answer properly. James believes someone has deliberately framed him to harm his reputation and wants Lynn to investigate the situation. James and Ava are having an affair, despite James being married and having many other lovers. While James believes someone framed him and sees Xiao as a victim too, Ava suspects Xiao might have set James up and feels jealous that James seems to have real feelings for Xiao. James immediately holds a shareholders meeting to reassure them that once they hire the media to clear his name, the stock price will recover. Meanwhile, lawyer Lynn reviews the CCTV footage of the building and interviewing the security guard to assess Xiao's level of intoxication. The guard mentioned that Xiao kept insisting she wasn't drunk when entering the building. Chen visits Xiao at her home and reveals that he brought documents to the party and saw Xiao completely drunk. He then followed her and James to James's home. Xiao accuses Chen of being the one who called the police to humiliate her, because if he truly wanted to help, he would have called sooner. Chen denies this, but Xiao's parents, overhearing the conversation, burst in, convinced James had assaulted their daughter. The scandal is all over the news, and James's wife, Cindy, returns to China. She has had enough of James's infidelity and plans to divorce him. She demands half of their shared company shares and uses the scandal to pressure him. The next day at the company, Xiao's father attacks James, blaming him for harming his daughter, but is quickly stopped by security and he later calms down. Ava, Lynn, and James meet with Xiao's father to negotiate. James insists he hasn't harmed Xiao and claims their relationship is mutual. He explains that he promoted Xiao from an intern to assistant director because of his feelings for her. Xiao's father doesn't believe him, so James arranges a meeting with Xiao, secretly filming it to show her father the conversation. During the meeting, although Xiao is reserved, she doesn't resist James's affection. She agrees with him, confirming their relationship is mutual and that she only nodded to her parents' accusations due to the pressure from public opinion and their questioning. James assures Xiao he will take care of her and her family. The next day, Ava holds a press conference to officially clear James's name. Meanwhile, James agrees to Cindy's divorce demands but wants to keep voting rights as the major shareholder. Lynn visits Xiao's house to finalize an agreement where James will provide financial support and arrange for Xiao and her family to move to Thailand to avoid public scrutiny. Lynn then speaks privately with Xiao. Xiao admires Lynn for being a top lawyer at only 35, earning a six-figure salary, but also criticizes her for being too cold and professional, showing no concern for the emotional damage done to her. Xiao tells Lynn to go away, along with the settlement offer. At the police station, Officer Ming finds CCTV footage of the anonymous informant who reported Xiao's case. However, the person is wearing a hood and covering their face, so their identity remains unknown. Ming shows the footage to Xiao, but she doesn't recognize them either. Ming questions Xiao, asking why she didn't deny the assault at James's house but only spoke up at the police station. Xiao can't answer. Ming then encounters Lynn by chance and, believing Xiao has been coerced, so she doesn't share the forensic report or the photo of the informant with her. Meanwhile, Ava receives information about the phone booth used by the anonymous tipster. That night, Lynn and her assistant lawyer, Kang, go to investigate the area. There are many security cameras, but they are all on private property. Eventually, Lynn finds a restaurant willing to let them review its CCTV footage. Lynn and Ming walk the route from the phone booth, checking the timing to confirm that the person in the footage is likely the caller. the anonymous informant's face is covered, but Lynn notices that their body size and posture resembles James's former bodyguard, Ian, who resigned just the day before the incident. This raises Lynn's suspicion, but James oddly dismisses the idea that it could be Ian, giving vague responses that hint at something secretive between him and Ian. That night, Chen meets Xiao and urges her to report James to the police to reopen the investigation. Xiao, fearful of media attention, hesitates. Chen grows frustrated, having witnessed James using his position as CEO to manipulate Xiao into agreeing to the relationship and ruining her reputation as his mistress for the past 3 months. When he suspects that Xiao may willingly do it to get ahead at work, Xiao gets angry and slaps him. Lynn finds out that Ian used to be very close with his manager, so she goes to meet him. However, the manager seems hesitant when she asks about Ian and claims he knows nothing about him. Eventually, he reveals that James personally called him and instructed him not to answer any questions about Ian. At that moment, the manager is notified that a fight is occurring at the company and has to rush off to resolve it. It turns out Chen has assaulted a colleague, causing him to bleed from the head because he dared to speak ill of Xiao. The injured colleague calls the police to report Chen, while another co-worker calls Xiao, who is still at home, to urge her to intervene. Chen expresses regret for not protecting Xiao. Just as he says this, the police arrive and take him away. Xiao rushes to the company to clarify Chen's situation. However, since she is not a witness, Chen is still taken away. Xiao and Lynn follow to the police station. Ava informs James about the incident, and contrary to her expectations, James does not fire Chen. Instead, he wants to see Chen's records. He even does a few pull-ups out of jealousy toward Chen, who is younger and also has feelings for Xiao. James learns from Lynn that Xiao is at the police station, so he goes there to talk to her. He criticizes Xiao for her thoughtless actions. He both comforts and threatens her into agreeing to the settlement. The next day, Xiao and her family will be flown to Thailand. Lynn, sitting in the front seat, notices that although Xiao does not resist, she appears very frightened. Later, Lynn still wants to find out more about Ian, so she visits the delivery company where he just started working after leaving his job as James's bodyguard. Yin's new boss informs her that he has disappeared just a few days after starting. Lynn also checks the company dormitory but finds no sign of Ian. Although his belongings are still there, Lynn goes to see James again. He admits he knows about Yin's disappearance but swears to Lynn that he hasn't done anything wrong and is not hiding anything. The next day, Lynn goes with James's people to pick up Xiao's family and take them to the airport. The neighbors gather again to gossip. Lynn tells the men to load the bags in the van while she stays behind to finalize the contract with Xiao's parents. Xiao considers escaping, but James's men block her, and everyone gets into the van. After driving for a while, Xiao thinks about Chen's words and changes her mind. She screams and demands to get out of the car, even though they are on the highway. At this point, Xiao's father also insists they should go back, but James's bodyguards refuse and force them to stay seated. Lynn speaks up, saying, holding someone against their will is illegal, and they should turn the van around. James becomes furious when he hears about this, and Ava seizes the opportunity to speak ill of Xiao that she gets greedier and wants to use this situation to blackmail James. James calls Xiao to ask what she wants, but this time, Xiao is no longer obedient. She bluntly tells him she doesn't want anything from him and that she won't take his orders anymore before hanging up. James and Ava wonder about what Xiao might be planning. Ava, out of jealousy, thinks that Xiao wants to force James to divorce and marry her. Lynn, however, thinks Xiao intends to report James to the police for rape. To figure it out, Lynn meets with Xiao again, and as expected, Xiao wants to go to the police station to file a report that James take advantage of her when she's unconscious. Lynn takes Xiao to the police station and immediately informs James. Ava is furious that Lynn didn't stop Xiao, but Lynn claims that, as a lawyer, her job is to protect her client lawfully, not to be an unethical attorney. As Lynn prepares to leave, James chases after her and persuades her to stay, asking her to help him mentally prepare for the arrest by the police. Since the police don't yet have solid evidence proving James's guilt, their goal is to present evidence that Xiao is untrustworthy and deceitful. Lynn advises James in great detail about what will happen, that she predicts he will be captured for 7 days. At this point, James finally admits that he lied to her about Ian. He confirms that Ian is the one who made the anonymous report as revenge. James had fired Ian because he suspected that Ian had feelings for Xiao and was jealous of James. Lynn warns James not to lie to her again, or she will stop defending him. She then hands James the contract to transfer shares to Cindy for him to sign. James later calls Cindy to instruct her on how to manage the company and handle the crisis if news of his criminal investigation breaks. He wants Cindy to ensure he doesn't lose his position as chairman. James then takes a shower, puts on his best suit, and calls his son. In the morning, while James is having breakfast, the police arrive and take him to the holding cell. Shortly after, Cindy arrives at the CEO's office to represent James's role of director. Stepping back into the corporate world after 7 years of being a stay-at-home mom, soon, Lynn and Kong go to the police to submit their first set of evidence proving that Xiao lied. The first piece of evidence is a video interview with the security guard at James's building, where he confirms that when Xiao arrived, she was walking on her own and saying that she's not drunk. The second piece is CCTV footage showing Xiao at James's door, where James claims Xiao told him she couldn't stand, asking him to carry her inside, so he did. The third piece is another statement from the security guard, revealing that shortly after James and Xiao arrived, Xiao called him to bring up wine that had been delivered to James, and her voice during the call was completely sober. With this evidence, the police can clearly see that Xiao lied about being completely unconscious and taken advantage of by James. As soon as James is arrested, the company's stock plummets, and its subsidiaries face margin calls worth millions. Cindy uses her own money to cover the shortfall. The next day, she holds a board meeting and persuades the shareholders to elect her as the new CEO, citing the need to protect the company's reputation. The board, already looking for an opportunity to distance themselves from James, all vote to appoint Cindy as the new CEO. Lynn's former mentor's wife storms into her office, furious. Her husband, now gravely ill, still talks about Lynn. The woman accuses Lynn of seducing her husband while she was away, using that affair to advance her career. Lynn stays silent but is deeply shaken. She recalls being a 20-year-old student. Her mentor, Professor Wang, a family friend, suggested she stay at his house for tutoring while his wife and daughter were in the US. One day, trusting him, she didn't lock her door, and Wang entered, making advances. Lynn resisted and reported it, but the department head dismissed it, blaming Lynn for staying there and advising her to stay quiet to protect her reputation. In the present, that night, Lynn meets with her boss, who also was a student of Wang. Wang had arranged for Lynn's internship at his prestigious law firm. Lynn asks whether she got the position because of Wang or her own abilities. Her boss admits the truth: it was Wang who pulled strings for her, and at the time, her profile wasn't remarkable. This revelation leaves Lynn feeling even more conflicted. In the jail, James is repeatedly insulted by a fellow inmate, leading to a fight. When Lynn visits him, she notices how his mental state has already deteriorated after just one day, so she decides not to tell him that Cindy has officially become Deshang's new CEO. The next day, Xiao returns to the police station to apologize for lying in her initial statement. She admits she was afraid that if she revealed she had been conscious, it wouldn't be enough to prove James guilty. Officer Ming advises Xiao to be honest, as it's the only way to truly help herself. Xiao revises her testimony, stating that she woke up shortly after arriving at James's home, finding him kissing her. She was afraid to say no, but she wasn't willing either and tried to avoid James 3 times but failing each time. First, at the door she tried to leave by saying she wanted to go home, but James took her into his room. Second, she tried to avoid him by going to the bathroom with the excuse of taking a shower. Third, she called the security guard to bring wine to the room, hoping to escape when James opened the door, but James scolded the guard and sent him away. However, all of these events are still not enough to convict James because Xiao never directly resisted him. With 15 hours left before James's temporary detention ends and the police must decide how much longer to keep him, Lynn and Kong return to the station to submit their second set of evidence. This time, the evidence includes a video of James talking to Xiao, in which Xiao repeatedly admits she was not forced into sleeping with him. Ming's boss believes Xiao is being two-faced, but Ming thinks the situation is more complicated than that. She argues that James's power could have pressured Xiao into lying and admitting it was consensual out of fear, thanks to the 2 sets of evidence. James's detention is extended by only 4 more days, totaling 7 days, just as Lynn predicted. Lynn even requests for James an earlier release, saying that Xiao's testimony is unreliable. But Ming refuses, explaining that Xiao had initially been unsure of what to do due to the pressure from James, but once she calmed down, her testimony became consistent. Lynn files a bail application for James so he can stand trial. When she meets James again, Lynn finally informs him about Cindy's new role. James is shocked, as he had always believed his wife to be content staying out of the limelight, but now she has used his downfall to seize power. Lynn thinks differently, Cindy's actions are intended to save the company, as James's scandal severely affects its reputation. However, James is still furious. On his way back to his cell, he slams his head against the bars. He is then taken to the prison infirmary. He even used his injury to ask to get out of prison earlier, but of course it doesn't work out. Meanwhile, business partners and James's employees are summoned to provide testimony about James and Xiao's character. They describe him as a charming womanizer, saying that while many men cheat, James is the type of man women actively pursue and doesn't need to force any woman. Meanwhile, Xiao's colleagues believe she was favored by James, which led to her rapid promotion and being frequently invited to business meetings with him. They mention that James even gave her a black card for work and personal expenses. Many suspect that Xiao was in a relationship with James since she never seemed to resist his advances. Some even think that Xiao accused James just to gain attention. Ava supports this theory by presenting a report showing large sums of money the company had spent on Xiao. Lynn becomes determined to find James's former bodyguard, Ian, believing he knows something. From Ian's manager, Lynn learns that every month, Ian would send half of his salary to his ex-girlfriend, Mi, despite her being married for 2 years. Ian and Mi were childhood sweethearts, but 2 years ago, Mi was raped by her employer. After hearing the news, Ian attacked the man and was arrested, but he was released 2 days later. Surprisingly, Mi married her rapist just a month after the incident. Lynn and Kong travel to the village where Mi lives, accompanied by a municipality police officer friend of Kong. However, Mi's husband Bao is a well-known figure there in this place, and everyone is afraid of him, so no one is willing to cooperate with Lynn. While having lunch, Lynn accidentally spots Ian and chases after him. Ian quickly escapes, and Lynn loses track of him, but she eventually discovers the place where he was staying. Xiao picks up Chen as he is released from the reform center and accompanies him home to apologize to his parents, as she feels responsible for the fight that got him in trouble. After hearing the full story in Xiao's fight for justice, Chen's parents support their son and warmly invite Xiao to stay for dinner. That evening, Lynn visits Mi's house. Mi's husband speaks to her through the intercom, claiming Mi is not home, but in reality, she is at home and has just been beaten by him. While he sleeps, Mi escapes, and Lynn takes her away. Mi believes Lynn is a lawyer sent by Ian to help her escape from her abusive husband. Lynn brings Mi to her hotel. Lynn helps Mi to clean up and her body is covered in bruises and injuries. Later, Lynn interviews Mi about Ian. Mi reveals that 5 days ago, Ian came to see her, but her mother-in-law caught them. She tells her husband and he beats and keeps her locked up for the past 5 days. Mi tells Lynn's story about her and Ian. They had been in love for several years. While Ian was in the military, he sent her money every month, and Mi saved it with the hope that they would marry once they had enough. However, Mi met Bao, who, although their relationship was purely employer and employee, took a special interest in her. Bao rented her an apartment and bought her many gifts. Eventually, when Bao planned to return to his hometown to start a business, Mi followed him. One night, after a work party, Bao raped Mi and found out quickly and confronted Bao, beating him up. Bao used the threat of not pressing charges against Ian that could harm his military record to force Mi into marrying him. Left with no choice, Mi broke up with Ian and married Bao. Meanwhile, Chen takes Xiao home. When he's back home, his parents have a conversation with him. While they outwardly support Xiao's quest for justice, they don't want Chen to have a romantic relationship with her, afraid it does some damage to their reputation. After understanding Mi's situation, Lynn advises Mi to gather evidence of Bao's abuse and become financially independent to divorce Bao and gain custody of their 2 daughters. She also gives Mi some money for emergencies and agree to represent her in the divorce for free, and Mi is thankful. The next morning, Lynn tells Kong she believes they can argue that Ian reported James out of personal bias due to his past, which could weaken his credibility as a witness. They bring breakfast back to Mi at the hotel, but she's already gone. Lynn suspects Bao is behind it, so she goes there to find her. Sure enough, Mi has been brutally beaten again. Lynn takes photos of Mi's injuries and urges her to press charges for assault, but Bao threatens Mi with their daughters, scaring her into staying. Later, while driving back, Lynn sees a pile of rocks blocking the road. As she gets out to clear them, someone knocks her unconscious and deletes the photos she had taken of Mi's injuries. Luckily, Lynn soon regains consciousness and, despite feeling disoriented, manages to call Kong for help. Meanwhile, Chen gives his statement to the police about Xiao. He explains that they were close at work and that Xiao's family isn't well off. She was determined to stay at Deshang and earn enough to support her parents, which is why she doesn't dare confront James, even though she feels uncomfortable with him. Xiao is questioned by the police about Ian. She denies having any special relationship with him. However, she admits that Ian had intervened sometimes when James tried to cross the line with her. Meanwhile, Lynn regains consciousness, and Kong takes her to the local police station to file a report about the attack. Initially, the officer seems reluctant to help, but Kang's friend arrives. And because he has a higher rank, the officer's attitude changes. After looking into the case, the officer claims that Bao has a solid alibi, so they can't do anything. Soon after, Kang's friend receives the news that the officer is close to Bao and could be helping cover up his crimes. Lynn and Kong decide to return to the city. Once back, Lynn gets her injuries checked and thankfully finds no serious damage. Ian also returns to his dorm to collect his belongings. Ming and her team arrive and take him in for questioning. Ian admits that he accused James out of revenge because James fired him suddenly without explanation. Ian denies being a witness and also refutes the claim that he ever helped Xiao. He says he doesn't believe James is a rapist, and that James is the kind of man women love. When asked about his accusation, Ian points out that since Xiao is now accusing James of rape as well, he can't be charged with defamation. Ming feels frustrated, realizing that Ian is very experienced about the law and has carefully worded his responses to avoid any involvement. Lynn takes the info about Yin's bias to the police, and the next day, James finally gets released. When he gets home, he tells the helps to burn all the clothes he wore in jail because he wants to get rid of any memory of that place. James is eager to get his chairman position back, so he tries to sweet-talk his wife, Cindy, saying he's changed and doesn't want a divorce anymore. But Cindy tells him he should lay low since he's still being investigated. James refuses, insisting he needs to be in charge again, and even says Cindy is incapable of running the company as well as he did. Cindy, now in control, tells James to leave so she can focus on her work, showing how their positions have flipped. James talks to Ava about having a board meeting to vote him back as CEO. Ava disagrees, saying it's not the right time. They need to first clear his name before thinking about getting him reinstated. The next day, Xiao is called in again for questioning, this time by a higher-ranking officer. This officer asks her directly why she accepted money, gifts, and help from James if she didn't have feelings for him. He questions why she never clearly said no to him and thinks that she might have kept things ambiguous to get those benefits. Xiao struggles to answer and thinks about withdrawing her case. Ming gets angry and argues with the higher-rank officer, saying that just because Xiao was confused doesn't mean she should have to deal with harassment. The officer responds that his questions are normal. He warns her that if Xiao takes this to court, the judge and prosecutor will ask even tougher questions. The officer scolds Ming for being too emotionally involved and says it's slowing down the investigation. Since there isn't enough evidence, the case gets closed and the lawsuit is dismissed. James throws a celebration party. He gives a big donation to Lynn's law firm and makes a speech praising her for all her hard work during the 13 days of the case. After the party, Lynn reminds James to sign an NDA with Xiao. She suggests that they should both agree not to share any personal information or details about the investigation to protect their reputations. Lynn also advises James to give Xiao some money as part of the agreement to make it more binding. The next day, Lynn meets Ming at the gym. Ming knows Lynn since their university days and also knows about Wang. Ming questions Lynn's choices, accusing her of helping powerful people like James instead of standing up for someone like Xiao, who went through a similar situation. James, meanwhile, starts losing control because of everything he's lost due to the scandal. He asks Lynn to arrange another meeting with Xiao, believing he did nothing wrong to deserve this. During the meeting, Xiao is nervous at first, but eventually, she speaks up, saying James forced her into everything. James is determined to get his CEO position back, so he calls for a board meeting. The night before, he talks to all 6 board members, and they promise to vote for him. But during the actual meeting, no one votes in his favor. They all think Cindy is doing a good job and see no reason to change things. Meanwhile, Xiao decides that she will move to a new city and start fresh with a new job. She resigns from Deshang and is required to return all the gifts James had given her, which are a huge amount of expensive items. The HR manager comes with a group of people to Xiao's work dorm to confiscate the stuff. Lynn gets recognized for her work and is awarded as one of the top 10 lawyers by the Bar Association. But Wang's wife accuses her of having an affair with Wang to boost her career when she was younger, and because of this, Lynn's award is revoked. Meanwhile, as revenge, James orders Ava to leak information about Xiao to the media. Ava also tells the HR manager to require Xiao back to the office to sign her termination papers. When Xiao arrives, Ava humiliates her in front of the staff. One of the employees handling her returned items accidentally drops the paper bag, revealing all the things James had bought her. After seeing all of this, even Chen could no longer believe in Xiao's innocence. Kong takes Lynn's parents to the lawyer awards ceremony, where everyone is surprised when Lynn doesn't show up, and her name is missing from the list of top 10 awardees. Kong, after knowing the reason, goes to the hospital to confront Wang and his wife. However, Lynn's senior, Fong, is also there and stops Kong from causing a scene. That evening, Kong meets with Lynn and asks her to clear her name and stand up for herself. He brings up how Xiao, a young assistant, had the courage to speak out against James, while Lynn, who's already a successful lawyer, afraid to do the same. He believes Lynn should explain the situation and defend herself against Wang's wife's accusations. Lynn's parents overhear this conversation and finally realize what has happened. They regret trusting Wang and allowing him to mentor Lynn. Lynn doesn't want to make them feel guilty, which is why she hasn't reported Wang. Xiao agrees to sign the NDA, but when Lynn arrives to finalize it with James, he avoids her. James, consumed by the desire for revenge, decides he no longer wants to sign the agreement. He tells Lynn that if she disagrees with his decision, he's ready to hire another lawyer. Still wanting to uncover the truth, Lynn visits me again to ask about Ian. Lynn admits that her original intention for approaching me was to investigate James's case, but she is still willing to help me with her divorce. Me reveals that Ian came to see her a few days ago and gave her a savings book with a large sum of money to help her divorce bow and win custody of her children. However, Me didn't accept it because Lynn had previously warned her that taking money from Ian could harm her case. Lynn grows curious about how Ian managed to get such a significant amount of money. Kong later introduces me to his police friend, gives her his contact if she ever needs help. The next day, video surfaces online of Xiao drinking enthusiastically and entering James's house. This shifts public opinion entirely. Even Xiao's parents and Chen start doubting her innocence. The videos quickly become a trending topic, with public sentiment swinging in James's favor. Many people now view him as the victim of a trap set by Xiao. Lynn rushes to confront James. He denies leaking the video, but Lynn isn't convinced. On top of this, Xiao's personal information is leaked online, including the gifts James had given her. Xiao shuts herself and her parents inside their home to avoid the public harassment. Soon, crowds gather around Xiao's house, ringing the doorbell and harassing her family. Ming comes to see Lynn once again, pleading with her to help Xiao and convince James to stop the public attacks against her. James, on the other hand, is enjoying the support he's receiving from the public, but Cindy confronts him, calling his actions despicable. Feeling guilty, James meets with Ava, blaming her for going too far and fueling public hatred toward Xiao out of jealousy, but she reminds him of what they did to him before. And James decides to keep going to the end to restore his reputation. Lynn tries to talk James into leaving Xiao alone, explaining that she's already suffered enough. However, James refuses to back down and insists on suing Xiao. He warns Lynn that if she won't support him, he'll find another lawyer. A few days later, just as the situation seems to calm down, Xiao's family's peace is shattered when someone throws a brick through their window. Xiao's father loses his temper and goes outside to confront the crowd. They pin him down and insult his family. When he returns home, he tells Xiao that they should have just submitted to James to avoid all this trouble. Furious, Xiao storms out of the house. She runs through the crowd of onlookers filming and taking pictures of her. Xiao makes her way to see Lynn. Lynn arranges for Xiao to stay at Kang's family old house in the suburbs, giving her a safe place to hide. The two women have a chance to talk and grow closer. However, the next day, Kang messages Lynn, telling her that Ava is at the office discussing plans to sue Xiao. Xiao sees the message and misunderstands, feeling betrayed by Lynn once again. After Lynn leaves for work, in her despair, Xiao wears in her nicest dress and attempts suicide by jumping off a cliff. Lynn senses something is wrong when Xiao doesn't answer her calls and rushes back to the house. She alerts Ming for help, and together, they search for Xiao. Although they find her in critical condition, Xiao is still alive. Lynn informs James of the situation, and he is filled with regret. He offers to cover all the medical expenses for Xiao's recovery, deeply remorseful for how far things have gone. At the hospital, Lynn finally opens up about her complicated history with Wang. Initially, she didn't reciprocate his feelings, but Wang used his influence to secure an internship for her at one of the top 5 law firms in the country by calling one of his former students. Lynn knew she wouldn't have been able to get such a prestigious position on her own. So despite knowing that Wang was a predator, she couldn't bring herself to speak out against the rumors surrounding them. Ming also reveals a painful moment from her past. 7 years ago, she handled a workplace sexual harassment case, but due to her lack of experience, she harshly questioned the victim. The girl, unable to prove her innocence, eventually committed suicide. This tragic event made Ming more cautious and empathetic in her investigations now. Initially, James decides not to sue Xiao, but when he realizes that even his own son believes he's a villain who has driven someone to death, James becomes obsessed with clearing his name. He decides to go through with the lawsuit against Xiao at any cost. Lynn is disturbed by how cruel James is becoming. She announces that she is withdrawing from his legal team and will represent Xiao if she's sued. Lynn declares that, even if this causes a conflict of interest, she's willing to leave the legal profession, surrender her law license, and fight for Xiao as a citizen. Immediately after, Lynn hands in her resignation at her law firm, transferring her responsibilities to Kong and her other colleagues. Lynn's parents try to stop her from giving up her law career and even take her lawyer's license, hiding it from her in an attempt to prevent her from making this drastic decision. Kong is also upset by Lynn's willingness to throw away everything she's worked for, but he is forced to move forward with his own responsibilities on James's legal team. In the midst of all this chaos, Mi calls Lynn in a panic. Bao has discovered her plans to divorce him, and in a violent rage, he brutally beats her. In self-defense, Mi grabs a knife from the drawer and stabs him several times, leaving him unconscious. Lynn, trying to stay calm, tells Mi to call Kang's police friend and turn herself in. Bao doesn't die from the stabbing. But the entire village turns against Mi, labeling her as a murderer. They justify Bao's abuse by saying that Mi was not a good person. Since the case takes place in a rural area, the trial is unfair. Despite Lynn's excellent defense, arguing that Mi had been abused for over 15 minutes and only used the knife in self-defense when Bao became excessively violent, the court still finds Mi guilty of intentional harm. Lynn encourages Mi to stay strong and appeal to a higher court. After a lengthy battle, Mi is finally acquitted. Xiao eventually recovers, although she still needs to use a wheelchair. Determined, she wants to face James in court herself. Lynn suggests they file a sexual harassment lawsuit against James, as it could influence the outcome of James's defamation case against Xiao. Grateful for Lynn's help with Mi's case, Ian decides to testify in support of Xiao, exposing James's harassment. Ian returns the large sum of money that Ava and James had given him to keep him quiet. Ian testifies that the night before the incident he saw James harass Xiao and block her from going home, just as Xiao described. Ian intervened, allowing Xiao to escape, which led to James firing him. Ian also admits that, initially, he reported the grape based on suspicion but lie. During the initial questioning to avoid getting involved, despite James's lawyers trying to argue that Xiao never explicitly said no and accepted gifts from James, Xiao maintains that she never consented. She admits she wasn't the perfect victim, with her emotional state being complicated, but harassment is harassment. Ava decides to leave both James and the company, realizing her feelings were one-sided all along. James, feeling defeated, tells Cindy he wants to stay with their son abroad for a while, and Cindy agrees. In the end, Xiao wins the lawsuit, requesting only a symbolic compensation of 1 yuan. Ming also shows up to congratulate her. After the trial, James becomes a stay-at-home dad. But his son resents him. Xiao struggles to find a job, as many employers invite her only out of curiosity about her case. Lynn offers Xiao a position as her assistant, and Xiao happily accepts. Xiao also wins her lawsuit against the online news outlet that leaked her videos and personal information, receiving a compensation settlement.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more videos like this.